You're listening to the Nerd to Know Media Network. Join us at nerdtoknowmedia.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's now time for our main event. Take a trip back in time to the golden era of the wrestling world with your host, Chris Techrold Blade. Welcome to Once Upon a Turnbuckle.
Welcome back to another very special episode of Once Upon a Turnbuckle. And I get to welcome today not only one of the biggest names in the Reach Wrestling locker room, but I think if you were to look at the British wrestling scene over the last 10 to 15 years, this guy's name does crop up a lot. I'm thrilled to welcome the one and only English Lion, Eddie Ryan. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. Good. Thank you. I'm so glad to have you on. When I started compiling a list of, I started turning this into a certain direction earlier this year and wanted to bring a lot more of the British guys on. You were on my list back then. So I'm glad we've finally been able to make this happen.
Oh yeah, perfect. We did try once before, didn't we? But the world was upside down.
Life gets in the way, doesn't it? That's the thing.
It does,
but
yeah.
There we go.
100%.
But one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on is because out of all the British indie guys, I suppose, you've got quite the storied career. Whether you say so yourself, I think it's very impressive, some of the stuff that you've done. So I do want to sort of talk around that. And also then your involvement with Reach Wrestling, which is, another reason why I wanted to bring you on here to sort of talk about that. But if we, in true tradition for this podcast, if we go right back to the beginning first, because I'm very, very interested in, particularly guys in the industry, how, where, why you discovered wrestling as a fan before you even thought about getting into the ring. Can you remember when that was, when you first discovered what it was for yourself?
Yes, I can actually. I remember getting the WrestleMania 4 cassette tape, which is a double tape.
Yeah. And
that was a Christmas present for me. And I just remember the Christmas day, we'd sat down and we were watching it and I was just captivated by everything. Macho Man, just the big elbow drops and everything, all the color and all the spectacle and the flamboyance and stuff. That's the very first thing I remember, which is why WrestleMania 4 always has like a special place for me. A lot of people say it's a bit rubbish, but for some reason it's just always been special.
I think even the look of the videotape is different. It's the only double tape I think they had back then. It was a monstrosity if you had it on your shelf. But no, it's a brilliant time. A brilliant era. I'm very much a fan of the late 80s, 90s. My first event that I ever saw was Survivor Series 88. So the same year. Very fond of that, even though, some people again might not think it's the most exciting. So I appreciate your love for that. And it's an iconic moment, really, Randy Savage becoming the champion, I think, and the mega powers and
I think what makes it stranger is that I kind of had missed the Hogan part of that, if that makes sense. So for me, it wasn't a passing of the torch or anything. So Savage was the first person that I had seen. Like I'd seen Hogan earlier on the card against Andre, but it was a bit of a meh match. Yeah. But, the incredible story they told was Savage. And we didn't have access to Sky or anything like that. So I didn't really see any of the build until the next WrestleMania. So when you see WrestleMania 5 and now the Friends are now fighting each other, I thought that was kind of a captivating story, especially if you go back and watch it. But so for me, I didn't even have the backdrop of Hogan to then go to Savage. So I didn't really see what the fuss about Hogan was until you go back and watch the first three WrestleManias.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
Even then, I mean, I was a little bit on the fence with Hogan, I suppose. Yeah, he was the one that kind of got ran down your throat back then when I first got into it. I much prefer the Ultimate Warrior. I thought he was a bit cooler.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciated he was the big guy then, but it was nice to see guys like Savage, and then later Bret Hart come through.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of over there. What age were you back then? What year were we talking about then? Was that the era, or was it sort of you started a bit like I did? I suppose you started with the older stuff.
I started with the older stuff, so not to give away my age, but I was born in '85, so I was born into that era. So I sort of grew up with the golden era into the new generation, and then I was the right age for the Attitude Era because I was a teenager then. Yeah. So I sort of grew up in the right way, if that makes sense. You know, I wasn't an adult in the golden era, so I started as a kid, grew up into all the generations that needed to be. So I sort of started off at that golden era, and to be fair, I go back, and that's the bit that I enjoy watching more than anything, to be honest. Sort of the 80s and early 90s. I like to watch that. That's my entertainment, if I'm honest.
Well, there's only a year between the two of us, so exactly the same. So I do appreciate exactly the same era. Who was your sort of hero then growing up across
from that era? It would be Bret Hart.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people from our era would definitely sort of say that, you know, like my now, if I had to pick, it's sort of like 1A and 1B with Shawn Michaels, but it's only sort of really Shawn's later work. At that time, I don't think there was many kids who probably weren't a Bret Hart fan if you watched the WWF at that time. You know, his storytelling in matches, I still find myself caught up in them. And so back then, you know, it was the be all and end all. So it was Bret Hart for me.
92 was a good year, really. I found when you knew he got to that point. Heartbreak in 93 when he lost it, and I've done a show before on 94. It's probably one of my favorite years. Bret, I know, and I don't think you can get much better than that. Yeah,
so I'm the oldest of 5, and I have a younger brother, so I could completely. I'm not the younger brother. I'm the Bret of the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I 100% got it, and so when you go back and listen to like some of these podcasts, like with Bruce Pritchard and things like that now, where they say, you know, like Vince didn't understand why two brothers would fight each other. I find that completely baffling because me and my brother just fought all the time about everything. So it made 100%.
It's about as real as you can get, you know. And in the world of professional wrestling, where at that point, when that was going off, I was starting to question it. People had started to say to me then, you know, it's not real, right? You know, and even though I was like, yeah, of course, you know, of course I know that. In my head, I was really confused. But you have a thread like that. It really does sort of hold it together and keep
absolutely
it real, doesn't it? So that okay. So when was it then going from there, growing up in this golden era that it was? When was it that you first then started to decide or have serious thoughts that you wanted to start doing it? As a kid, I think we all do. Really, we want, as wrestling fans, we want to get in there and do it. But when did you decide, you know, I am going to pursue this? I'm going to find a way.
So for me, I never really knew how you could become a wrestler, if that makes sense. So it was never anything that really came to my mind until I got to my older age. So at that time of the Attitude Era, about 98, 99, 2000, that's when I'm sort of aging up into like 14, 15, 16. But at that time, sort of leading up into that, where like the WWF dipped at that time, 95, 96 is kind of that sort of weird time where it was a bit rubbish. I didn't have access to Sky or anything like that, and I had very much fallen more into pursuing football. So I'd started secondary school and I'd become a lot more active, started playing football, and I was seeing some success with football. So I was playing that at weekends, and I hadn't fallen out of love with wrestling. It had just been a case of I didn't have access to it, and it just didn't interest me all that much at the time. And so I started playing football more, started playing for teams and, you know, like getting trials for clubs and things. And then that was at that time where the Attitude Era started coming along. So now all of my friends who originally thought wrestling was a bit rubbish, now they like it too. So now you suddenly have access. You can go to your friend's house and now you can watch it because they have Sky. And so I started to see it a lot more. So I played football, watched wrestling sort of on the side, and then sort of got to that sort of age 16 to sort of 18 where I needed to sort of make my next decisions in life. And I decided I was going to go to uni. And it wasn't until I got into my third year of uni where I was just thinking about it, thinking, is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? You know, it was that. And I was quite, if you'd seen pictures of me when I was younger, I was just sort of tall and gangly, very slight in size.
Right.
So wrestling was never really an option for me. It was just like, I wouldn't be very good at it. But I just had got to that point of uni where I was just like, you know, if I'm going to do something, it needs to kind of be now, if that makes sense. I'm not going to get any younger. You know, you meet people who sort of start wrestling when they're 30s, and it's just such a short shelf life that I just sort of thought, right, okay, what am I going to do? And it was only by perchance that my mum said, well, you always wanted to be a wrestler when you were a kid. And I thought, well, yeah.
Wow. Can't argue with that encouragement from the parents, can you?
No.
Really?
So I went and found a local wrestling school just to see what it was like. And I was very fortunate that on my second training session that Joel Redman was there. And he sort of gave me side directions to where to get properly trained, because the school that was here, because there wasn't all that much in the Southwest when I first started. I went to that school, it would have been in 2007, and the scene, there wasn't a scene in the Southwest, so to speak. The training schools were very sort of just backyard but indoors. So so luckily Joel sort of pointed me in the right direction and went from there.
Cool. Was he training training at the time, or was he a little bit more further along at that point?
I always say this to him because I find it very weird, but Joel is younger than me by about a year or two, but he's about 5 years further ahead because he started much younger than I did. I didn't start wrestling training until I was 21, and even then I didn't class that as wrestling training because where I was training was so poor. So I class myself as being trained from the age of, well, I first moved to Swindon in October 2008, so I was just about to turn 23, and I had to like unlearn some of the stuff that I had learned to then learn it properly. So but yeah, no, Joel was about 4 or 5 years ahead of me, but he went a different way. He ended up finding a school who then pointed him in a direction of just going straight onto like the summer camps. So he didn't do like a great deal of training. He sort of like learned on the job straight away, if that makes sense, which is different to how a lot of people learn these days. They find a school, they pick up odd bookings here and there, and then sort of get a bit busier. But yeah, he was about 5 years ahead of me at that time, and he was building quite the reputation for himself, and he was already pretty good then. So luckily he was very kind to me, pointed me in a direction of better schools, and off I went.
History. So thinking about your transition then from just training to then your first match in the ring, do you remember much about your debut, as it were?
I remember it very vaguely. It was a bit of a blur because you're kind of, a bit panicky and nervous and all those kind of things. But I remember the venue, and I was just in with another trainee guy, and it was what it wasn't. Like, I'm sure if I watched it back now, I'd be like, a bit of a teeth dryer. But in my memory, I don't remember it being particularly good or bad. It was just, what it was, and it was just like that first sort of toe in the water to jump in and do more, really. So
and it made you want to go back, obviously, because you're still doing it. So
100%. But yeah, it was organized by like the training school. So I moved to Swindon to train with 4FW in Swindon, which had a full-time facility at the time. They've since closed. I think they closed in like 2016 or 17. And so I was there, and they were running their own shows. So it was just one of their sort of little local shows. So I was just sort of thrown on and see how you do, sink or swim. And that was it. I'd only been training for about 3 months at that point.
Wow. It always intrigues me. Yeah. How long? Because I suppose when you grow up, you think you got years ahead of training, whether it is just recently, last 10, 15 years, it's changed as the industry really has exploded. But I hear people doing it for like a couple of months and then getting time in the ring. Other people sit it out and they're at it a lot longer before they get to that point. Is it just a confidence thing, do you think? Or you've got to have a certain amount of ability to obviously carry yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it helps if you're in there with someone who has experience to guide you through too. The difficulty is when you have two people who are trainees or limited experience, is you don't have that experience of if something goes wrong, or you know how to listen to the crowd or things like that. So when you're two trainees, you're just kind of the blind leading the blind, so to speak.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like you say, there are some people who I know who have been training for months or years that still aren't quite ready, and for some people it clicks quicker than others. It's just a case of every individual is different. So I was lucky that, I picked it up quite quickly. I was keen to learn. I was at the training school 5 days a week. I knew I had to play catch up, because a lot of these, especially now, a lot of these kids are like 16, 18 when they start. And I was already 23 basically. So I was years behind. So I needed to sort of get my ass in gear and crack on.
And get your ass in gear you did, I think, looking at what you've done. So, I mean, when your name first came across my radar, I will admit, which I've admitted a lot on this show, is there is a void with me and wrestling. We went through about 10, 15 years where we didn't talk. And I kind of started getting back into it around about 2015, more on a more local level, when I realized down here in Devon, there were shows happening with notable names on the posters. It kind of made me want to go and have a look. So I went to a show that Pro Wrestling Pride put on in Paynton. And I swore blind you were on that show until I've actually gone back recently to look at the results, and I found actually you weren't. So I think it was just through me following Pride at that point that I kind of I saw your name pop up. I was at I think it was the Heroes and Legends, the first one at Paynter, when Hacksaw Jim Duggan was there. And then it wasn't too long after that, I don't think, that you actually won the Pro Wrestling Pride heavyweight title.
In Taunton, Yes, at Taunton,
So we're going to fly around over a couple of years here. I'm not going to concentrate too much. I'm just going to let this kind of open up. But over those couple of years, around about sort of 2016, 17, looking at some of the guys that you got to work with. So one of your title defenses for the Pro Wrestling Pride heavyweight title was against Hardcore Holly.
Yeah.
Firstly, obviously, obvious questions. These are obviously fanboy questions. What was that like, at that stage in your career, having a title defense against a legend like that?
Weirdly, Bob Holly was one of my favorite wrestlers in that sort of attitude era. I've never been a big fan of people who rely on a lot of talking to get over. I'm very much more substance. I like to watch people wrestle and have good matches. The talking part was always something where, if you turn on Monday Night Raw and it always starts with that talking segment, I'll go and make myself a cup of tea, because I'm not a huge fan of the stories. The stories help 100%. And, as long as the talking is interesting, then it's fine. But I just kind of want to watch matches. I'm very much like that. So, I always liked Hardcore Holly's matches were always believable. They were intense, and you believed everything he did was real, and he had a great drop kick, and everything about him was just really good. He looked great and everything. He was just one of those guys where you kind of think that if he was born in any other era, maybe, although he did cross many eras, to be fair to him, he did come through, like how much more success would he have had? And, obviously he wasn't a particularly good promo or anything like that. No. But in terms of everything else, he was almost a complete package.
Yeah.
But I always thought that, he was very, very good. So when I got the opportunity to work with him, immediately the first thought is you remember back to like things like Tough Enough and stuff where, he's half beating up trainees and things like that. And, his reputation precedes him. And then I met him, and he was probably one of the loveliest guys I've ever met in wrestling, really. And so, I get to meet him, and he was complimentary and nice, and, we talked. And then I think it might have been at the interval. So I think it was definitely before our match, but I can't remember where our match was. It was either our match was due to be before the interval or after the interval. And he was insistent that he wanted to sell his own merchandise so that he could, he trusted himself. He didn't trust other people. And the promoter was like, no, it's fine. We'll sort it for you. And somehow, somewhere, someone lost his money that he had made. And I've never seen anyone go from a placid, lovely, happy man to the angriest person I've ever seen. He just launched a water bottle at the wall, which exploded everywhere. He had people up against the wall and everything like that. He was just losing his mind. And then once that got resolved, he went back to being as lovely as can be. And like, I'm just sat there thinking, I'm going to get it now because he's angry, he's wound up, and now I've got to go out there with him, and I'm going to get beat up. But no, not a chance. He was lovely. He was nice and snug. He didn't beat me up. Nothing particularly hurt. He was just true pro. Took me through the match, and couldn't have been any nicer. And afterwards, with some kind words, and very occasionally we still keep in contact. I don't have Twitter, which is the main thing that he uses to communicate. So we exchange emails here and there. But
that's cool.
But yeah, he couldn't have been any lovelier.
It's a great match as well. I've seen it. I think it's still up on YouTube. And you know, he's a real sportsman at the end, isn't he? I mean, a lot of these guys who come out of that era, and they've got this reputation. I think it's great to see them. The fact that you can see them locally, but see them as them as well, after the match and whatever. And I really do. I loved his when he first went into WWF as Sparky Plug. I quite liked that, a real underdog sort of thing. And I think he was so underrated until the hardcore division came along, and then all of a sudden he found his niche. I think. Yeah. It's, I'll throw some more names at you again. Just any memories in particular of working with names like this. This isn't just a name drop here. We always to talk about you, but I'm very interested in sort of the working with these guys, how it kind of shaped your career at this point. You've got wins against people like Tommy Dreamer, Paul London. I think you also, jumping ahead, I want to talk about 5-star wrestling in a bit more detail anyway, but I think PJ Black, if I'm not too mistaken, was on there. So you within these couple of years, you really did get to hone your craft, as it were, with guys who had been there. Who would you say, as well as any sort of general memories you got of working with these guys, who would you say you learnt most from being around or in the ring with?
It would, like if we're talking about, like those people who have a pedigree, we say WWE or things like that. The two main ones that spring to mind are, I had a match with Chris Masters for Southeast Pro Wrestling, and that one I learned a lot because we really didn't plan a great deal at all. So the thing I liked about Chris is he was a lovely guy. He's obviously got a quite imposing figure, even though he isn't quite the Chris Masters that we would remember debuting for WWE. He is still got an impressive physique, and it's quite intimidating when you meet him because he's a gigantic person, but he's lovely. But the thing I learned the most from him was, like, we look up to these people as being people who we see on WWE, and they have achieved all these things. But what he really sort of related to me was that we are really the same people trying to achieve the same goal. He's just further along the line. And so, like we planned a finish to a match, and he trusted me to call parts of it. And obviously I trusted him to call parts of it and tell a story. And that one I learned a lot, because that one was where I treated myself as an equal to someone rather than I allowed him just to sort of call the match and carry me, the rookie, along, if that makes sense. And the other one would be Drew McIntyre at the Guildhall when he was TNA champion. And that was obviously a big moment because he had some mega momentum behind him at that point. It was in my hometown at the Guildhall, which is obviously quite a prestigious venue. And again, I could have very easily been, the guy who's just like, I'm here to learn from you, so you tell me what the match is and I'll just be, generic wrestler B. But instead, he had done his scouting too. He didn't want to be in there with people that might potentially injure him, because obviously being TNA champion, it would have put a halt to things. And so he had done his research. There was a few of the Scottish lads who I knew from 0-1 wrestling out in Japan. And so they had given him a good recommendation of me. So he came in, and again, we put a little bit of a match together, but called lots. And he gave me a lot of credibility, to the point where he gave me a false finish where he put his foot on the rope real last minute, so everyone thought I had won. And then we just switched it around. So, brilliant. But like, he taught me a lot about things like creating drama in matches and things like the real storytelling aspect of it, and like little snippets like that. But but yeah, those are the main two of, you know, if we're talking about guys who, you know, are currently in WWE or have been in WWE, they really helped me a lot in those matches.
Is that match with Drew, was that for the TNA title? Did I read somewhere you won that opportunity? You got you won a number one contendership match for that one. That's amazing. Didn't realize that was in Plymouth, actually. How special was that? Yeah, that's amazing.
It was incredible, honestly, until I came to do like the NXT UK stuff with WWE. That was like a proper like goosebumps moment for me. And you know, it's still very important, especially when you go and, you know, you see what Drew has become. Right. and again, like, you know, you see where he's gone and become, and it's still very strange that, you know, like occasionally, like you'll post something on like Facebook or something like that, and you'll get a like, and you'll be like, who's that? And it's him, and he's still keeping tabs a little bit on what I'm doing. It's just, you know, it's nice. You know, he could have just been like, I'll forget this trainee, you know, but
I mean, when I was growing up, you probably felt it too. British wrestling in the mainstream wasn't really that well presented or represented. You had Steve Regal, you had British Bulldog, you didn't really have much else. If you were to sort of put your spin on it as to what's changed or when it changed for British wrestling, this sort of invasion or insurgence now that we've got on the main promotions, where do you think the tables stand?
So the way I see it is, when the World of Sport era came to a close, you know, and everything started to wind down from the hot era of our time, so to speak, you know, a lot of those guys kind of just went away and took all of their knowledge with them. So they didn't, the way the wrestling business works is you learn from everyone and then you give back, so that those people underneath you can then take it to a higher level and then give back. So it just, you know, it's like a cycle, and it goes round, and we improve it. But what happened is a lot of those, you know, British guys, once the World of Sport era kind of crashed, they kind of just thought, well, I'm getting out of this, and off they went, you know. And so there wasn't that passing of the knowledge to the next generation. And so what happened is you had a few people like your Jody Fleisch's and your Johnny Storms, and in my case, you know, like your Doug Williams, who's someone who's I massively look up to. They're basically trying to learn their craft from just making it work themselves, and you had these people bridging the gap, which wasn't, you know, there was not much there, which is why a lot of these people ended up having to go elsewhere, because there's nothing for them here. You know, and so that's why Doug ended up in Japan, and, you know, Regal ended up in America, and Dave Taylor ended up in America. So then it sort of comes to the time, because again, when I started in 2008, the British wrestling scene was still pretty poor. There were a couple of big promotions at the time, you know, like I think your 1PWs were still kind of in existence, and FWAs. But for the most part, you know, like most of the shows in this country were run, and they were very small, and they might have 20 people in the audience and stuff. Like, it was bad, you know. Like, I remember wrestling in front of 7 people. It's just the appetite for wrestling wasn't here, and we kind of followed that cycle of WWE. So when WWE's hot, the whole scene's hot. And so WWE in 2008, like, I don't really remember anything that was sort of happening at that time, but I know that it wasn't particularly popular. It sort of dropped off a cliff after about 2004. And so, you know, like you have these guys who are, you know, trying to bridge the gap for us. And then at that time, you know, around about 2008, you know, that's when you start to see better quality training schools starting to pop up, and then better quality trainees are starting to pop up. And, you know, like then there's this a scene as a whole, you're kind of pushing everyone along, because, you know, like you see so-and-so's getting popular, and you kind of want those spots, so then you try and get better, and then that pushes someone else to get better. And so that's why we've seen this sort of revolution of British wrestling, because we're all sort of, you know, it's almost like a what's the right word? It's a synergy, because, you know, we're all working harder, and it's elevating the level much higher than it was before. And you know, everyone's sort of giving back, and then you get some of these guys who have been away, you know, people like Doug, who was at TNA, and he comes back here, and now he's passing his knowledge back along, and that's how we've got to where we are. But that's where it really started to pick up, is once we managed to get that knowledge back, And once we started to sort of, build the foundations, and then, all these schools are, building the talent up and producing better quality trainees because there's better quality training. That's where it really started to explode. And that's when the other companies started to realize, well, hang on a minute, there's like a whole scene here, which is hotter than anywhere else. And that's why suddenly World of Sport and NXT UK start to build up, because you can't take all those British guys to America, so you need to kind of have a place for them themselves. So
absolutely. And I think it's great that we've got a platform to showcase our own, rather than relying on like you say, going over the Atlantic. And back then you had like two choices. You wound up as WWF or WCW. Hopefully there is the competition out there now, a little bit more than there was, but for a lot of guys, I think it's great to stay here, isn't it? It's just as much opportunity here now. So
100%.
So you're helping, just jump into the present just for a moment. You're doing your bit now, as well as still performing, entertaining us all with your incredible ring skills, but you're passing your knowledge on. I believe you're one of the trainers in the Reach Academy.
Yeah.
So just talk quickly about how and when your involvement with Reach first started, and sort of where you see it going. What is your main goal within it? We'll talk about a big match you've got coming up yourself, but sort of your role as the superstar in the ring, and also the trainer, as of the guys coming through. Where can you see it?
So my first involvement, weirdly, started with I lived with Grayson Reeves in Swindon for a little while. Because he trained at WAW in Norwich. So I met Grayson way back along when PWA was the Plymouth company, and he was a trainee there. And he asked me what he needed to do to, start to get successful and things like that. And I just said exactly the same thing as what Joel said to me. You need to get out of the Southwest, because there's not a great deal down here. We're kind of on that sort of appendage of the country where there's a handful of companies, and you need to go to a full-time school, and you need to get better trained and get places where you can get to shows. And so I gave him a couple of contacts. WAW was one of them. And then before I knew it, he was up and moved to Norwich, and he was there training. And so fast forward a couple of years, if you've ever tried to drive to Norwich from Plymouth, you'll realize that it's a very, very long way.
Yes, I've looked at it on the map. I used to work in logistics. So I tried to route a few people that way. But yes, I can.
Yes. So I think after a while, he got a little bit, I think we all do, like even I did in Swindon, and Swindon's only like 150 miles. I think he got a little bit homesick. And so just randomly one day, he sent me a message saying, "Do you still live in Swindon?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm still based here." And he's like, "I'm moving there because my friend lives there. So do you think you could like help me get set up with a few things, like the gym and stuff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, not a problem." And so he was here. He was there in Swindon. And so that was how that started. We just sort of started as people who were just people who went to shows together, basically. Right. And then around about 2018, maybe at the start, that was when PWA, I believe, sort of started to, decline a little bit. Yeah. And Matt said about potentially running shows with Jason King. And I was like, well, it's going to be hard work and stuff, but if you think you can do a better job than them, then crack on. Yeah. And so they started just slowly going about putting on their own show, and he asked if I would be involved, because obviously at the time I was starting to get some traction and some popularity. I think their first show was 2018, so I would have already done the 5-star stuff at that point. Yeah. And so I'd been around the Southwest for so long, and been especially the Plymouth crowds and things like that. I think it sort of just became if you run a show in Plymouth, you kind of have to have him on, kind of
right
thing. Okay. And so he obviously said, do you want to be on and stuff? And I said, yeah, sure, that'll be good. I always like to get home. It's always an opportunity for me to get home, because I was always so busy that getting home for a weekend isn't kind of a thing you can do. So I don't find myself in Plymouth maybe like once or twice a year in the end, which when you love your hometown like I do, it's kind of a bit rough. But you get used to it. And so that's how I ended up starting with Reach. That was just really it. And they put on their show, and after a period of time, they start building a good following, and the stories are all good. And And then fast forward, we get to March or April 2020 when COVID suddenly raised its ugly head and everything shuts down. I was working full time at my job. I was working from home, but I was in Swindon. And eventually it sort of dawned on me that if I can work at home in Swindon, I can work from home in Plymouth. It doesn't really matter where I am. I'm still working from home. Yeah. So I got the all clear from my employers and moved back to Plymouth. I think it was about September or October last year. Right. And I remember being down there, and I popped along to the training school to take a look at the trainings. I'd done some seminars for them and a few random training sessions for them along the way whenever I was back home, just to try and help them out and try and pass on a little bit of knowledge. And I was back home at that time, and I just remember dropping into a training session and everyone having really good fundamentals, and everyone was being trained the right way, that Matt and Jason would have learned from WAW and other places. And I just remember just being there, and I've always kind of enjoyed teaching. I take an enjoyment out of you when you teach something to someone and you can see that it sort of clicks in their head when they do it, and almost like that pride sort of beams across them. Yeah. And I just thought I wanted to open a training school. It's especially being based down here now. It's not that I'm trying to slow down as a wrestler. I'm not old by any stretch, and the country is kind of a bit still iffy as to what we're really sort of doing with shows. Yeah. But I knew that passing on my knowledge was definitely something that I wanted to do. But opening a school myself, one, I don't really have the time to do that. I've got a lot going on. I have a job and trying to renovate a house and everything. It's trying to get to the gym and then run a training school like 5 days a week is not something that I have the time to do, and then try and do shows at the same time. And then secondly, it would be a conflict of interest. I think, I when I sat down with the initial talks with Matt and Jason, I said, I don't really want to open a school because it kind of burns our bridges, because, like at the end of the day, I'll be splitting students and things because, they have to commit to one school, because you can't really sort of split between two with the way that I would want to run it. Sure. And I didn't really want to sort of upset that apple cart, so to speak. So I said that I would enjoy training and I would like to be a trainer for them if that was something that they would be interested in doing. And they went away and had a talk, and we came to an agreement, and so I take a couple of sessions during the week. Like one of the things was take a kids class. I think it's good to sort of get the kids interested in wrestling from an early age, because if you can get them hooked at an early age, they're easier to mold as performers as they get older, because they've obviously been doing it a lot longer. Whereas, if you start at like 16 or 18, you've already got a couple of years gone. So, take a kids class, which was good. And then I take an advanced class and cover a couple of sessions. But really it's just, Matt and Jason are very good trainers, but I'm trying to offer that knowledge that I've picked up from traveling the world and working, with those people that you said earlier, and being in the sort of the WWE system and things like that. Just the little bits that maybe they don't know themselves, or like maybe they do and haven't ingrained so much, and just those bits that I picked up that I can offer these people that they don't already have access to, and just give them almost like that cherry on top of the cake, so to speak, in terms of their learning.
That's amazing when you touch on the experience that you've had as well. Adding that dimension. I chatted to Jordan Sparks a couple of weeks ago, and he was sort of describing his experience within the academy with you three. And I just had this picture in my head that it's just like a conveyor belt. You're picking up something different from everyone. And how many wrestling schools out there have got that level of knowledge and experience coming at them from sort of multiple angles,
100%. And the way that it kind of works is, as you say, is a bit of a conveyor belt. When people come into the school, they meet Jason. He takes them through the fundamentals and sort of just basically teaches them what they need to know, their bumps, their a little bit of footwork and hitting the ropes and all those sort of those building blocks that they need ready, so that when we chuck them in the deep end a little bit with Matt and myself, they're ready to sort of either sink or swim, so to speak. But so far, you know, everyone that I seem to have come across at the school just, you know, is swimming. It's just the difficulty is that there's not all that many shows in the Southwest, so they're all sort of competing with each other to try and get somewhere. So I feel for them. I do, but they're all working hard. That's all that they can do. So, you know, hopefully now that we're coming out of COVID now, that there'll be more opportunities, as you know, like CPW has started back up, and that gives them an opportunity to get out in front of crowds, because that's the real place where you learn. You can spend all of your career at a training school, and a training school helps with, like, you know, just getting reps in and perfecting little bits. But at the end of the day, the job is learned in front of a live crowd, and you know, hopefully they can start to sort of make headway with that now that we're coming out of the tunnel, so to speak.
Yeah. And that brings nicely then, I think, to one of the events that you've got coming up, one of the big matches you've got coming up. So you are currently the #1 contender to the Reach Heavyweight title, which you will compete for in Plymouth.
Yep.
It's Plymouth again. So Plymouth really is Plymouth. It's almost like, obviously, as well as being your hometown, it's your spiritual home, because how many big moments have you had? Just to rattle off a couple again, just to go back to 5-star, I won't be able to go into it into much depth, but you know, when you went into 5-star, you went straight into a rivalry with Jake Hager. Jake Hager,
Jake Hager, Jack Swagger. I used to get it wrong too. Don't worry.
So you went straight into a feud with him, and it blew off with a title match in Plymouth. Yeah, obviously. And you competed at an NXT UK show in Plymouth. And I've also seen an interview with you where, was it the pavilions that you sat your exams as well for uni? So this place,
that's you know, that's the only time I've ever been in the pavilions other than for NXT.
That's amazing. So I mean, you know, those two experiences, NXT and then, you know, 5-star with Jake Hager, you know, pressure much on that? Massive. Or is it just, you know, what is it like? Is it adrenaline taking over, or you know?
I've always been someone that works better under pressure. You know, I don't like to float along. I like, you know, like up the ante a little bit and rise to the occasion, so to speak. And so just to quickly explain, the 5-star show at Plymouth came about because I kind of accidentally pushed for it. So so the promoter he's from Newcastle, so all those shows that you would have seen at the very start of the run were up north, because that's what he knew. So you had Sheffield, Liverpool, Newcastle, and then obviously week 5 was Belfast. But week 4 originally they had no show booked in that day. They had something provisionally booked in and it never came out. And so, you know, like week 1, I'm not really overly sure why he initially pushed me as such a big babyface, because I'd been working around the country, you know, just sort of gaining a little bit of steam and notoriety and stuff. So, but he booked, like, the reason he booked me, I remember we were speaking on the phone, and he said I had a great look, you know, I was in good shape, and he loved the lion mask and stuff. And we sort of skirted around the issue, and it got to a point where I was like, have you ever actually seen me wrestle? And he went, no, I just like the look. So I could have been absolutely terrible. But yeah, and so he just really likes the visual of, you know, the patriotic Brit against the patriotic American. And so that's why that all sort of came about. But yeah, with the 5-star thing, we had nothing booked in, and I used to liaise with him. You know, I like to learn the business, like the whole scope of the business. You know, like, so whenever I work for, you know, like a company, I like to, you know, like if I've ever worked for Ravenhill, I like to watch how he runs his business and exactly how he runs his shows and things like that. I don't just want to be a come in and, you know, do my bit and then go away a bit kind of thing. You know, like if you have me on your shows, I kind of want to be all in on it, if that makes sense. And so he was talking about what he needed to do for week 4. Maybe he would have like a recap show, because it was just live TV, and I'd never done live TV at this point. So like I'm literally at these shows with Rey Mysterio and Rob Van Dam backstage, literally going to them and asking, can you help me? I have no idea what to do. I've never done live TV. I've never done, like, you know, like promos specifically before. And so I'm literally begging these people to help me, you know, and then I'm seeing people, you know, like online, because online can be a horrible, toxic place. They're like slating my promos and things like that. And it's just, well, I have no idea, guys. I'm doing my very best. I'm trying to do whatever I can. But yeah, and so I was just remember talking to the promoter, and he was just like, is there any decent venues down the south that maybe we can contact to try and book in week 4? And so selfish me was just like, like Plymouth always draws a really good crowd if you go down there. And now if you ever go back and watch those 5 shows that they did, the Plymouth one was the best. And there was a reason that WWE then did NXT UK in Plymouth. It's because they watched the show and saw how good the crowd were. So WWE watches everything. So I just remember saying, try the pavilions. They were doing all these big, 10, 12,000 seater venues at the time, which was specified by the TV company. And so Plymouth Pavilions is about 2,000. And so they did that. They sold that out, and that was by far the best show that they did there. I remember all the performers coming back afterwards, because I always, I'm proud of where I'm from, and I'm very open about it. And I said to them, Plymouth is always a very, very good crowd. They're nice and lively. You'll really enjoy it. And they all came back, and they were just buzzing from it. And so that's how that came about. And then
that's cool.
That was awesome. And then literally when 5 Star folded, that's when WWE contacted me, because they'd watched the 5 Star stuff and they'd seen me on the Plymouth show, and that's why they were keen to use me again when it came back round.
And there we go.
So it's a big chain. It all links together.
This is something I wasn't aware of until I know you reposted it on social media recently. I think as a memory as you NXT UK. Now, was this the show where Triple H and HBK were there? Am I thinking the right one? Yeah. Okay. So this sticks in my mind because I saw that being advertised. I wanted to be there. There was probably no decent reason why I wasn't there, and it was probably the biggest night I could have actually witnessed, because I was absolute HBK nut when I was growing up, and he was in.
So was I. Sorry, just to give you a little bit more context on that. So I kept it a secret that I was going to be there. They said, don't tell anyone. We don't want to make it a big deal or anything like that. And so to them, like, me being there wasn't a big deal at all. I was just I was in there for a dark match just to see how I did, and if they liked anything, then maybe I might get a TV match. And so I'm there, and I'm just in awe of the whole experience. You're there with all these people, and you have to, you go to the production office and you meet Triple H, and he's a big old dude. And then there was another time where they asked me to get my music because they needed to find some of their own stock music. And so I run to my bag because I'm eager, and I turn a corner and I almost steamroll Shawn Michaels. And like all these amazing memories. And I just, basically they're like, you got 4 minutes, you've got a dark match against Saxon Huxley. Let's see what you can do. Basically, they'd already seen me on the 5 Star thing, but they just wanted to see what I did and see if I choked in a WWE ring. And so I just remember being backstage, and this is one of my favorite memories of my career now. And I'm just hoping that some of the fans will remember who I am from the local PWA shows, and maybe some might remember me from the 5 Star stuff. And they made a little mini Titantron for me, so I'm there waiting to go. You've got Shawn Michaels and Triple H just to the side of the entranceway with all their TV cameras, because they're directing, so they're shooting to different camera angles. And there's an usher who basically just tells you when to go. So I don't know what my music is. I don't know if there's a kick in or anything. So I'm just listening to this generic music, and then you can see the back of the screen, and it just pops up with my name. And honestly, just for myself, it was the biggest pop I've ever heard. And I just remember looking to my right, and I've got goosebumps at this point, because it's like, wow, this is special. And I just turn and look, and Triple H has stood up with his hands on his hips, just staring at me like I've done something wrong. And so like the usher's like, go. And so I go, and then it gets a second pop, and honestly, it was just massive adrenaline. It was brilliant. And I go out to the ring, and I get in the ring and look out, and it's, all these fans are so, appreciative on there. And it's almost like they followed my journey, and they feel like they're a part of it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the ring, and the announcer and the referee are smiling, and they're like, you're kind of over here. And I'm like, apparently so, yeah. And so I'm working through my match with Saxon, which is, as I say, 4 minutes. It's not long at all. And so we're halfway through. He's got me in a chin lock, and the referee leans in, and he says, Hunter's in my earpiece. He says, Eddie's got to go over, because I'm just the jobber. I'm supposed to be losing to the guy. And so I'm like, so now I'm thinking on my feet, thinking I now have to change my match around. Yeah. And so we get there, and we get backstage, and as I say, Triple H is there. He stood there with his hands on his hips, and he's just like, are you the hometown boy? Yes, sir. That's why I'm here. And he's just, no one told me. And so So he was explaining that if I had lost, they would have lost the crowd for the whole show.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want to kill the crowd. And so that's, that was a little thing for me. And I got loads of positive feedback, and, like I did well thinking on my feet, and it looked well on me and things like that. And they didn't realize I was going to be as popular as I was. And I was like, neither did I. And, and then the only reason, and I find this quite funny too. The only reason that they didn't plan to go out at all that night, the only reason they went out is because, this isn't to sound big-headed, it's just, obviously I'm just from there, is because all the other guys weren't getting the same reactions as me. And so they needed to find someone that would get a bigger pop. And so that's why they went out, to rejuvenate the crowd. And it was just a complete surprise. And it was just, let's go out and have some fun. It was never planned in or anything like that, but that's the reason that they went. And I just remember my friends, I told my friends the story because they were obviously old-timey wrestling fans. So they were from the Attitude Era and before. And so I told them the story, and they all had to say thank you to me, because if I hadn't have got that reaction, then they wouldn't have seen Shawn Michaels and Triple H.
There you go. Would have been a wasted trip for him, really, wouldn't it? But
I know.
That's amazing. What a memory. And am I right in thinking you did get another match under NXT after that?
Yeah, I did so well. They were so happy with me, and the reaction that I got, that they were building. They'll be building Fabian Eichner at the time, and Imperium, I think their tag team name is, isn't it? And they were trying to get some traction, and they just thought that putting him in there with me and me losing to him would get him some good heat and some good traction. So they popped me in there with him, and we got a nice 7-minute TV match, which, it was nice to be on. And sort of, even if I don't achieve anything more than that, at least I can say that, I had a match for WWE on TV on the network somewhere.
Absolutely, and it's still on there, because I managed to watch it.
Oh, perfect!
Saw a clip of it. So, was there any discussion after that of any more with them? Has it come across your radar since?
Yeah. So the most difficult part is that we had the conversation afterwards. They were like, "We're really happy. You did a really good job. You're a total professional. We have absolutely no problems. They gave me little bits of feedback here and there to work on, which is, as I expected." And they said, if anything comes up, we will be in touch. And it's just one of those things where they stay in touch. I'll drop them a message, because at the end of the day, they're looking at hundreds of people. I get it. They're the pinnacle. They can pick and choose from whoever they want to. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So every maybe 6 months or so, I'll drop an email into the contact I have, and we haven't forgotten about you. We'll be in touch when there's something. So it's very much just sort of the waiting game. And so I just sort of try and keep myself ready and try and keep myself fresh, so to speak, if they ever want to take a look. But yeah, it's just one of those things. And I suppose the most difficult part of it is if they'd said, like, you did this absolutely rubbish, you're crap, and we don't want to talk to you again, I'd be able to sort of accept that. But it's when they give you good feedback and then still don't contact you, it's kind of like, what more can I do?
Well, you never know. The next opportunity may be around the corner, when they may well see your match with Charlie Sterling.
Maybe.
Bringing it, nice segue into what you've got coming up. So you're another big match in Plymouth. I think it's December the 5th, I do believe. Yes.
Yes.
So I won't ask you what's going to happen. You're probably going to have a fairly, good idea of what you want to happen. Just in a nutshell, your history with Charlie Sterling, going into this match. How do you foresee it, being for you?
I've known Charlie for a very, very long time. Actually, it's got to at least be a decade now. We've crossed paths, and the good part about like us Southwest boys is that we've all, like Joel kind of set the benchmark, and then people like Charlie and Nikki Riley and myself have always just strived to just try and meet that. And then by doing that, it elevates the level of, of what the Southwest competition looks like, so to speak. So, like it helps. And then obviously the underneath people, we help try and elevate them. That's what helps the scene get better. But in terms of Charlie, anyone will tell you this. Charlie is probably one of the most naturally talented people that they have ever met. honestly, you can ask Charlie to do something and he can do it. It's almost sickening at how good he really, really is. And that's, quite evident now by the fact that, Progress are taking a look at him and he's starting to gain some traction and things. And hopefully there's some big things on the horizon. But in terms of what I want to happen in Plymouth is our paths have crossed so much, and he may well be so good, but I think his overconfidence might be his downfall there, and I'll just have to sort of play the wily veteran card, I think, and and see if I can wear him down enough. But yeah, we've crossed paths a lot. We've been tag team champions at Chaos. I think we know, much like me and Joel, me and Nick, me and Charlie, we've all crossed paths so much. I think we just know each other inside out. So it could just be a pick 'em. It could just be someone has a good night, someone has a bad night, I think.
Well, let's hope that you have the good night. So
I'm hoping so. This is like 2 years in the making, or 3 years, or whatever it is that they say. So
yeah,
it's about time we come good.
Cool. So I would love to be there. I haven't got a ticket yet. I don't know my availability. I would absolutely love to see this one. I got to see you in Tavistock, and you had a great match there. And I think, wishing you every success in that match. It would be great to see you come home. Well, you're already home, but come home with the belt. Absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you.
No worries. Well, I'll just a couple of sort of quick fire questions before we wrap it up. Again, bringing it back to your fan self now, I suppose. So we're going into Survivor Series season this time of year. I always absolutely loved it when I was growing up. This was one of my favorite times of the year. I actually looked back earlier on. I watched the Survivor Series from '98. I forgot how good it was. I downplay the Attitude Era a little bit, but actually it was good times. Survivor Series wise, have you got a particular favorite or a particular favorite moment as a fan that you can always go back to?
I think especially for people of our generation, so to speak, I think Montreal and Survivor Series '97 will always be a big one. Part of me still thinks that that's a big work. Everyone sort of came out of that good, if that makes sense. Brett came out looking like the ultimate babyface, Sean the ultimate villain, Vince the ultimate villain. It's just everyone came out of that okay. And I'm just thinking, maybe while WWE now might not be as clever as it once was, I think that's definitely something that Vince could have orchestrated to work. I think at that time, I think it's definitely something. But I think this is a weird one. I can't tell you specifically which Survivor Series it is. I want to say maybe, is it '87 was the first one?
Yes.
87. I can't remember whether it's 87 or 88, but it's the random tag team Survivor Series match, which has like 20 people stood on the apron.
Yeah, they did one at each. They did one at each 87 and 88. 88. That was my first match I ever saw, because obviously I started in that event.
It's the one with the Bulldogs, the Hart Foundation, the Conquistadors. It's just so many people stood on the apron, and the match goes on for about an hour, and you can't, if you're a fan, you can't see what's happening. Surely everyone's just blocking the ring. Yeah. And that is weirdly one of my favorite matches, not because it's anything particularly good, but because of how completely stupid the whole thing is.
Yeah. If it's the 88 one, that is still one of my favorite matches, because it's one of my first ones. But I think that's why they didn't do it again. I did hear one of them. I can't think. I spoke to Scott Casey earlier this year. He was at that event, but I don't think it was that he referenced. But somebody did reference the fact that they couldn't do anything against the ropes, because there's a guy there all the time, so it really limited what you could do. It was entertaining.
Well, if you watch it from a cassette tape sort of point of view, it's really good. But I just remember as I got older, and I just put myself in the shoes of someone who bought a ticket, and I'm just thinking, all four sides are covered. You can't see anything.
No, you get to see the last 5 minutes. Yeah, probably the last 5 minutes you actually get an idea.
But that's one of my sort of guilty pleasures.
That's cool.
I enjoyed that. I enjoy that match just for its complete stupidity. But I enjoy Survivor Series. If you were to ask me to pick, and it's one of those things, I think my favorite sort of gimmicky top 5 thing, because obviously you had King of the Ring, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble. Royal Rumble is my favorite. Everyone loves a good Rumble, I think. Yeah. But yeah, Survivor Series has got its good moments and things like that. Montreal will always stand out. But yeah, it's just randomly that weird tag team Survivor Series match.
I like that. I know I can totally relate to that. I just finally, the question that it's become my favorite. So for anyone who's seen any of these recently, you know what's coming.
Right.
Your wrestling Mount Rushmore, who would be on it? It's a great one to throw on the spot. I do apologize.
That's all right.
At the end, but
well, I can give you the top two straight away, and that's Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels.
Sure.
Just because, as I say, I grew up with Bret, and I think as good as Shawn was in the second part of his career, when he sort of went away and got better and came back again, my favorite, well, both of them really, both of my favorite incarnations of both those people are 97. So 97 Bret Hart when he's the heel. I think his heel work there, I love babyface Bret Hart. I thought he was fantastic. I patterned some of my work after him because of his selling. He was a fantastic seller, and he told great stories. Yeah. But 97 Bret, when he was bitter and angry, when he turned with Steve Austin in 96 and then had that run of hating America, I think that might actually be some of his best work.
It's his best promos.
Not from an in-ring point of view necessarily, but from a character standpoint, I think that bitter Bret was very, very good.
Can't argue with that.
But also 97 Shawn Michaels, when he was so arrogant because he knew how good he was, Shawn Michaels, when he was sort of DX Shawn Michaels. Like those two at that time were amazing. And I'll still go back and watch anything from those two in that era, because they were just like leagues above everyone else. It was unbelievable. I think if I then, so I've got two left. A big inspiration for me when I first started trying to get back, or not get back, and get into wrestling, Eddie Guerrero. I have his name because of Eddie Guerrero. I thought he was incredible. It was a very sad day when we lost him. He was probably one of, at that time, like, active wrestlers, he was by far my most favorite one. And again, he just had so much heart and passion, and you cared about him as a character, and his matches were brilliant, and just everything about him, he was just fantastic. And then my fourth one, and this I'm going to give to him because of how much he has inspired me on a British level, because it's very easy just to say, you know, like, I'm just going to fill it up with WWE guys or WCW. Like, I could have very easily picked, I don't know, there's probably 10 or 12 people I could have gone through the list. You know, like when I was a kid, I loved Surfer Sting. We didn't have paid TV at home, so Channel 4 WCW Worldwide, Sting was my guy. And so, but I could easily pick him. But I'm going to go for someone who has massively inspired me on the British level, and that's Doug Williams. Someone who has bridged the gap for our generation. You know, like, he could have very easily just gone to Japan and forgot all about us, gone to TNA and just forgot all about us. But he, you know, he went away basically carrying British wrestling on his back, with a few others like Jody Fleisch and Johnny Storm. There wasn't all that many guys who were flying the flag for us in that time. And Doug is one of those people that not only carried the flag, but, you know, he really elevated it. You know, if you listen to, you know, like Vince Russo's podcast or Eric Bischoff's podcast, from when he was in TNA, like, you know, all those people who worked with him in TNA, they talk about how incredibly good he was. And part of me is a little gutted that I wish he could have had his prime now, if that makes sense. Because, you know, like, he was in his prime back when, you know, British wrestling was in the doldrums a little bit. And I would love to see him in his prime against some of these people. And again, it goes back to one of those things where I said where, what was that I said earlier? Just wish that he could have, you know, like, love to see him now in any, like, he was great in the era that he was in, but I would love to see him in another era, because now he would just be even better than he was, if that makes sense. You know, with all these, you know, people now around the scene, you know, like, he would just be, you know, like, he wouldn't be in this country. He would be in WWE, and he would have the recognition that he definitely deserves. But you know, he's someone that I've patterned my style after, and, you know, and he's just someone that is you know, he's done a lot for a lot of us in this country, and I think sometimes that goes unnoticed. But for me, like, when I got into wrestling, the first show I ever watched live was the 2008 2008 Pro Wrestling Noah show in Coventry at the Sky Dome.
Oh, okay.
And so I didn't really know a great deal about Japanese wrestling. I'd seen some on the Wrestling Channel, but not much. I'd seen him on the FWA stuff or the Real Quality Wrestling stuff that they showed on there. So I knew of him, but then watching him in person, he has this like silent charisma that you just pay attention to, and you're just drawn to him. And I just remember that looking at everything that he did, everything he looked like a wrestler, he looked like a professional. Everything he did was, believable. And I just remember thinking, if I'm going to make it in this business, that's someone that I want to look up to and be like. I'm not the most overly charismatic person in the world. I'm not like a Shawn Michaels who's over the top and silly. I don't cut amazingly witty promos like The Rock or anything like that. I know where I am in terms of wrestling. I'm very much more steak than sizzle, so to speak. And Doug was always very much that way. He let his wrestling do the talking rather than having to talk it, if that makes sense.
I think that's the British way. As far as I can see, when I grew up with British wrestling, because I grew up with the American wrestling all the time, what I saw with the British wrestling was almost uncomfortable to watch because it was really different. I respect it a lot more now because I think that is the epitome of wrestling. If you're looking at it as a sport, look no further than what the Brits did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But so that's my Mount Rushmore. That's cool. Mount Rushmore today. That might change in a week or whatever, but it's Brett, it's Sean, it's Eddie, and it's Doug. There you go.
Love it. No, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time, Eddie. This has been a blast. I'm so glad we got to do it. Good luck in Plymouth. Good luck with everything else that you've got coming up. Before I let you go, where can people find you? Either any appearances you've got coming up aside from Reach in Plymouth, and where can they find you on social media if they want to sort of not track you down, but follow you around?
Social media, Facebook, you can find me as a profile under Eddie Ryan. Go and give that an ad. That's going to have all my appearances on there anyway. Instagram, which is English Lion 1, I believe. I haven't looked at my handle for a little while, but I believe it's English Lion 1. I don't have Twitter because it's a horrible, toxic place, and I don't ever want to see anything like that ever again. So that's the only places you can find me on social media. In terms of performances, I have my calendar, actually. Obviously, they got the St. Austell show for Reach coming up. I'm not actually at that one. I'm in Stroud for Southwest Wrestling coming up, and I believe that is the 14th of November. But let's have a quick look. 21st November, weirdly, actually. 21st November, CSF in Trowbridge. I am wrestling Doug for the CSF All Nations Championship. So
wow.
You can catch me there for that one. So try and get along to that one if anyone's in that sort of area. It's always a good show, Trowbridge, always a good crowd, so hopefully we can get that one packed out.
That'd be brilliant. Oh, good. Have you faced Doug before, or is this?
Yeah, we've had a handful of matches against each other. I'd say we've probably wrestled like 4 or 5 times against each other. I've always wanted to do a tag with Doug. I've just weirdly, I don't know why. Probably because it's kind of like the teacher and the pupil type thing, maybe. You know. So, but yeah, no, we've wrestled a handful of times. But hopefully.
That'd be cool.
This one will be better now that I'm a bit more seasoned than I was back then, and
awesome.
And he's had a bit of a rest too because I know his neck was quite bad for a while.
Yeah, but as from what I could see in Tavistock, he's still got it. So
absolutely, that match was incrable. I was a curtain sellout. I was stood behind the curtain watching the whole thing.
I bet everyone was, to be fair. I don't think anyone was lingering.
There's no 2 better wrestlers in this country in terms of wrestling than those 2 people. Like Joel is fantastic at that type of thing, and put him in there with Doug, and you got 2 masters of their craft, just having fun, so to speak. That's what it was.
There we go. Anyway, Eddie, I will let you go now. Thank you so much, sir.
Lovely.
I look forward, hopefully, if I'm at a Reach show, or if you fancy coming back on at any point, we can delve into a few rabbit holes. Be good to speak to you again, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed it. I'd love to be back on sometime down the line.
Thank you, bud. Ideal. Take care.
Lovely. Bye now.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to a Nerd to Know Media production.